It was a rainy evening, a moderate rainfall with few momentary flashes of lightning and claps of thunder. Matt was on his desk, going through the photos he took of himself and his friends earlier that day. They had an end-of-year party earlier at work, which was a regular event that was held on the 23rd of every December at the company he worked for. That didn't really mean that work was over for the year. They were still expected to come, but fewer than usual, and they would dismiss much earlier as well. This was to go on to the second day of the following year, except on Christmas Eve, Christmas, Boxing Day, and New Year's Day, when everyone had work-free days. He scanned through the pictures he took with his phone, which was connected to his desk computer to display the images on its screen. He saved the ones he liked on the device and deleted the ones he didn't like. A particular picture stood out to him from all the others. It was a picture of himself and friends and some work colleagues like the others. He looked closely at it and he could see a face. Not that the picture caught an actual human face, but it was the way he and the others stood in the picture and the office furniture in the background that created an illusion of a face, which was much clearer when he squinted his eyes. A coincidence, a strange one, he thought, and he decided to save the photo and mail it to his friends the next day. Later at night, while he lay on his bed, he found it difficult to fall asleep, mainly because he couldn't get the image out of his mind. After what felt like 2 hours of no sleep, he got up from his bed and went to his computer. He turned on the device and searched for the picture and opened it. The face on the picture was much clearer now than before, and he didn't have to squint his eyes to see it. He then turned on his desk lamp and got out a piece of plain paper and a pencil and started to draw. Thanks to his artistic skills, he was able to make a good drawing of the face, though he had to literally squint his eyes to get better details of the image. The drawing he created was that of an old man's face. He had shoulder-length hair and a long beard, but he lacked eyes. Instead of eyes, there were two smaller faces where the eyes should have been. Matt had no idea why he drew the face that way. In fact, he didn't remember not drawing eyes on the image, so he decided to redraw the image and get the eyes right. The second drawing was much better than the first, and it had more details, but like the first drawing, it lacked eyes. Instead of eyes, there were two smaller replicas of the same face, where the eyes should have been. He became confused and slightly frustrated. Like the first drawing, he didn't recall not drawing actual eyes on the portrait. He looked back at the face on the computer and remained staring at it for a while. Desire began to build in him, a burning desire to reproduce the face perfectly, to reproduce the pareidolia effect. Hours passed and he remained transfixed to the screen. He didn't hear the knock on the door or the ringing on his cell phone. All his attention was on the face on the computer screen. He took out another piece of paper and began to draw, taking his time to shade, highlight, and create as perfect and a realistic as possible image. He barely noticed the passage of time as he repeatedly redrew the image. Each redrawn image was better than the previous, more realistic, more detailed. But like the previous images, they did not have eyes. Instead of eyes, there were two smaller faces where the eyes were supposed to be. One day, there was a loud bang caused by his friends breaking through the front door. They were three in number: Ike, Kim, and Yusuf. Matt! Yelled the three young men as they searched for their friend in the apartment. There was a strong stench in the house, and as they approached the bedroom, the smell got stronger. The three friends feared the worst, considering that their friend had not been heard from or seen for days, and so they assumed that he was dead and rotting in his room. Bracing themselves for what they were about to see, they opened the door, and the stench that hit them was so overpowering that they quickly covered their noses. To their relief, their friend was alive, but they saw him frantically scribbling on a piece of paper. He paid no attention to them and didn't even notice them call his name. As the three friends walked into the room, they realized that something was wrong. There were flies buzzing around their friend, and there was excrement on the chair he sat on and on the floor around him. There was also a puddle of stale urine around him as well. They noticed the sheets of paper scattered all over the floor with the drawing of the old man. The smell was too strong for them to go nearer to him, but they could see that he was emaciated and unkempt. One of them pulled out his phone and dialed 911 to report the situation to the voice on the other side of the call. As they waited for the paramedics to arrive, Matt stopped his drawing and raised the artwork to examine it. It was perfect in detail and perfectly realistic, so perfect that it looked like a photograph. But just like the other drawings, it had no eyes. With the little strength he had, he banged his fists repeatedly on his desk in frustration, and he whimpered. He reached into his drawer for another sheet of paper, but there was no more. The sheets were finished. He then screamed with a shrill voice and turned his back. His friends were shocked when they saw his face for the first time, because it was bony and his eyes were white. For the first time in weeks since he started to draw, Matt stood up from the chair, but he was too weak to stand, and so he fell to the floor. "Help me, help me," he said repeatedly. "He's killing me," he said. The three men with some hesitation went over to him, holding their breaths as they dragged him away from the pool of pee and excrement he fell on. "He's going to kill me. He's draining me," Matt said repeatedly while he pointed at the screen. Ike, Yusuf and Kim looked up at the screen of the computer, which now flickered. The lights in the room dimmed as grey clouds slowly filled the sky outside. The screen continued to flicker, and the picture began to wobble and shimmer. Slowly, a grey mist flowed out of the screen of the computer and gathered in the air above them. The mist slowly condensed into a human shape. It condensed into a naked human form, taking the form of a tall, old man, bearing the same face that was drawn on the sheets of paper. Like the drawings done by Matt, the man had no eyes. Instead of eyes, they were smaller versions of his face, where his eyes should have been, and the mouths on the faces opened and closed repeatedly. The man had shoulder-length white hair that rippled like waterfalls, and he had a long beard that reached his waist. He glowed a soft, pale blue, and he hovered in the air. He spoke with a voice that sounded like several voices speaking at the same time. The voices came from his mouth and from the mouths and the small faces on his face where his eyes should have been. Thank you for the energy you have given me, but I am afraid I need more, he said. He raised his hands at the 4 terrified men that cowered on the ground, and blue mists flowed out of their eyes, noses, and mouths towards him.